If needlework is your passion, whether you're stitching by hand, machine, or mixing it all up, you're going to want to hear about the MrXStitch Contemporary Needlework Prize 2025. This prize celebrates the best in modern stitch, and it's open to creatives from all around the world, whether you're a student or an emerging artist or a seasoned professional. And the best part, you don't have to send your work anywhere. Just upload high-resolution images to a private folder we will send you after you enter. You can enter more than one category, for instance, hand embroidery and 3D textiles. Just grab an entry for each one. And if you've got a student ID, you can get 50% off the entry price as well. The deadline for entering is 30th of June 2025, and entries are now open at xstitchmag.com/prize-entry. Thanks to our brilliant sponsors, Bookmarked Hub by Search Press and David and Charles, and the legends at Lowry Workstands. If you've got the stitch bug, this is your time. Show us what you've got. Enter the prize now. Visit xstitchmag.com/prize-entry to get your ticket today. Dr. Susan K. Williams is the Chief Executive of the Royal School of Needlework and someone with a unique perspective on the world of embroidery and textile art. This is the second part of our Needle Exchange, and in this long and lovely conversation we talk about things like the Royal School of Needlework, how it came to be, what a position it has had, some of the noteworthy projects it's taken part in over the years. We talk about the Stitch Bank, the Royal School of Needlework's attempt to preserve the history of needlecraft and identify unique stitch formats. Did you know they're heading towards 500 different types of stitches? That's a bit of a spoiler for the rest of the episode. Do listen to it. But honestly, 500. Check it out. We talk about the meditative aspects of needlework. We talk about how embroidery has maintained its relevance and evolved in the new digital age. And just how the Royal School of Needlework has an important part to play, and still does, in the ecosystem of this craft that we love. I love talking to Susan. I was so honoured that she took the time out to have this conversation with me. I've met Susan and I've worked with the Royal School of Needlework on several occasions, and it's always an honour. And I have a lot of deep affection for her. She has been a steady hand at the tiller for an organisation that's seen a lot of change. And the Royal School of Needlework has never been in a stronger position. So if you're not aware of the Royal School of Needlework, do visit royal-needlework.org.uk to find out how you can join their classes. You can even do their degree course if you so choose. And if you enjoyed this show, please do leave a review on your favourite podcasting platform, or if you've got anybody who is remotely interested in the history of art, then do send them this episode so that they can enjoy it. I will be back next week with another conversation with a different textile artist, but in the meantime, enjoy the show. Let's talk about the Royal School of Needlework then, because you said you've been there, is it 17 years?
Yes, it'll be 17 years on the 20th of August.
Tell me tales of the Royal School of Needlework. I'm going to assume that people know what the Royal School of Needlework does.
Well, let's actually just give an overview.
Let's do that.
Because we were founded in 1872. Originally, we were about offering, and I love this word, suitable employment to educated middle-class women who would otherwise have been destitute. So if the main breadwinner, usually the male of the household, if he died or became incapacitated, then there was a growing number of women who then sort of had to find ways to make ends meet, and there was no sort of welfare state. So we were one of a number of organisations that was set up to offer suitable employment. Another was the ladies' printing press, and it actually had a special sign that said "For necessitous gentlewomen," and we were part of that. But we had a bigger role to play than that, and one was also about keeping hand embroidery alive, because by the third quarter of the 19th century, hand embroidery had become Berlin wool work. And Berlin wool work was canvas work, could be done with one stitch, and it was really blousy flowers on a dark background, and it was used for things around the home, bell pulls, chair covers, footstools, these kind of things. And so we were on the verge of losing white work and gold work and silk shading and black work and all these other techniques because they'd just kind of fallen out of use. And so our founder, Lady Victoria Welby, set up the school to sort of bring interest and ability in hand embroidery back to the fore, and particularly she was looking at it from the position of interiors, so things for the home that could be worked in embroidery, but also of the quality of fine art. She wanted hand embroidery to be recognised alongside fine art in galleries and in significant homes, that it wasn't just a sort of small thing for the domestic environment, that it could be art as well. And we've always sort of taken that idea forward. So that was our start. And then we very quickly had Princess Helena on board, who was Queen Victoria's third daughter. And she was very interested in embroidery and stayed with us right the way through until she died in 1923. And she was a major driving force for the organisation. And then we also took advice on the way we should go artistically. And we had an art committee, which included Frederick Leighton and a guy called Val Prinsep and G.F. Bodley, who was an architect but very much into designing churches, and a lot of churches were being built in the last quarter of the 19th century. And they suggested that we linked with the arts and crafts people. So that led us to William Morris, Edward Burne-Jones, Selwyn Image, and Walter Crane. And we did commissions based on designs by all of these people. And we went to the Centennial Exhibition in Philadelphia in 1876 with work by Morris and Crane and others. And then later we went to the Chicago World Fair with work designed by Morris and Edward Burne-Jones, including the embroidered version of Pomona. Which is huge. It's about 8 feet high by 6 feet wide. It's very big. And we worked all of that. So from the beginning, we were doing things on that scale. Plus, we were doing small things like blotters or a Bradshaw cover, Bradshaw being the train timetable of the period. Okay. And we had sales. So people could commission us at any time, but in order to try and drive income, we had sales initially in kind of May, June, so the beginning of the season when people would come to town out from their country estates, and literally Princess Helena would come and man a stand at the fair, and it opened when she got there. And she would stay the entire day. So it might open at noon and she would be there until 7 o'clock at night. And wow. Initially it was one day and then it spread to 3 days. And then leading up to Christmas, we then also instigated sales again. And we had a group of associates who would, different people would host it on a Thursday, sort of for 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. And they would be from different backgrounds. So we had links with the theatre. So one group from the theatre might host it 1 week. And the idea being that they would bring in different friends and different contacts to purchase things. So you'd have a sort of ongoing range of people purchasing. But of course, the biggest crowd always came when Princess Helena herself came and turned up for that. So that was a very big thing, because we were always set up not as a profit-making centre, but to be to just break even, as it were, and that the right. money would be ploughed back in to the work. And to, you know, obviously we're a charity today, and to continue that aspect of what we do. But then, you know, and we've been through many different ups and downs over the 140 or so years before I got here. But when I came, my brief was to help turn the organisation around. We were spending a lot more than we were bringing in, and that had to be changed because we were very close to going down if we hadn't changed that around. And we also wanted to look for a replacement for the apprenticeship, because we'd had to find all the money for the apprenticeship. And the apprenticeship, which had been set up in 1961, was about training people to be able to work in our studio. But by 2007, we could no longer take all the apprentices into the studio. So we wanted to come up with something different as a way to look at developing people. So in quite short order, if I talk to people externally, they can't believe how quickly we did it. I went looking what we could bring in instead, and we went for a foundation degree. So this was the 2-year degree program that Peter Mandelson had introduced. And at the time they said, oh yes, we want to support foundation degrees, getting people started more quickly with a kind of more practical aspect to the degree. So we thought, this is what we want to do. And I managed to find a validating partner in the University for the Creative Arts, and we got it all written, the whole course written and validated and approved and ready to start in 2009. And literally 20 days before the students were due to arrive, we got a letter saying, oh no, we did say that there'd be some money for this, but we didn't mean art subjects. We only meant STEM subjects. So sorry, there's not going to be any money for you. So we've always had to run the course just based on student fees and not anything else. But we had fortunately had a legacy. And we decided that we would go ahead with the degree with that legacy to sort of support us through that time. So then after a couple of years, well, when our very first students finished, they all actually wanted to continue with their studies. So we needed to get the BA year brought in, the third year, but then we transformed it into a full BA when Angie Wyman came on board as our course leader. So she saw that change through to the full BA course, which is what we have today. So that was the first kind of big development. But then we looked at where the students were going after their degree, and they didn't particularly want to teach for us, but that's what we then needed. They had great ideas to go off, and many of them they're in haute couture, they're in costume for films and theatre. So we needed to think about how do we attract more people to be teachers for us, because if we wanted to grow, we needed more tutors. And to teach for the RSN, you have to be taught by the RSN. We're not saying it's the only way or even the best way, but just it's our way. And to have that consistency is important. So in 2012, we introduced the what was called the Future Tutor Programme. And that has been running since and brought us in many more people who can teach for us. And we've just done an overhaul of that. So after a sort of decade or so, it's right to do a good overhaul. And the new, it's now called Professional Embroiderer and Tutor Programme. Will begin in September, but it's really the next iteration of the programme for how we train our tutors, because there are certain things that are hallmarks of the RSN. And so even if you've not worked in our studio, but you've been taught on the tutor programme, it means that you can work collectively. And that means that we might have a team of people working on a project, but at the end, it will look like the work of one person. And that's really important because, if you're doing things for major events, you want it to look like the work of one person. You want it to look cohesive. So we've always had that. And then the other great hallmark of the RSN is when we're working to a very tight deadline, what I refer to as never a seat shall go cold. And probably the tightest deadline we ever worked to was Queen Victoria's funeral pall in 1901. Every commercial company in the country turned it down because it was needed so quickly. And Princess Helena said, my school will do it. And from the time that the order was confirmed to the finished piece leaving the premises was 48 hours. And the actual stitching was 21 continuous hours of stitching by 45 women.
Oh my God, that's insane.
And it was the advantage of a funeral pall is it's very big. So we could have, it was 2 pieces of fabric, and we could have a team around each end of the fabric, because what they were doing was working the crest. And it was worked in a mixture of applique and surface embroidery. And then separately, we had a team working on the cross, which was cloth of gold, again with surface embroidery. And that was worked separately and then applied on the top once the 2 main pieces of fabric had been brought together. And it does still exist. It's rather fragile now. But yes, it was written about in all the newspapers that 21 hours of stitching by 45 women.
Amazing. I mean, that's not the only Royal Commission, though, is it? I mean, the RSN's
it most
got a track
certainly
record now.
is not. No, we have now done 5 coronations. So 1902, 1911, 1937, 1953, and 2023. We were asked to do pieces for each of those coronations. And then we did the wedding dress of the now Princess of Wales in 2011, worked on that. And earlier, we worked on trousseau. We used to have a lingerie department between 1916 and 1942, and we were known for trousseau. And of course, these were for the higher echelons of society. So we did some of the trousseau of Princess Mary, who was the daughter of George V and Queen Mary. So we did some of her trousseau, and we did all of the trousseau for the lady who was to marry the Duke of Gloucester in 1935. And that was a significant amount of work. And it was, we did all of these pieces and then delivered them. And then the RSN has always liked having an exhibition. So after the wedding, there was actually an exhibition of the all the work for the trousseau, so people could see it. And one of my favourite objects is, and there's a picture of it, is the hot water bottle cover. And these became known in our workbooks as just simply HWBCs. And during the Second World War, we made lots of HWBCs because clearly people couldn't have their fires on in the same way, and their rooms might have been colder and draftier. But there's lots of commissions for those.
And when you're doing pieces like that, when because I think someone said, and I might be making this up, but when you were doing the dress for the now Princess of Wales, people would have to wash their hands fairly frequently because you wouldn't want naturally occurring oils to be impacting the colour and the quality. Is that true?
To us, this is kind of normal. That if you every time you sit down, you've washed your hands beforehand. It was just, I have to say, it was just the reporters who got rather carried away by, because they were asking us for details, and we don't give out the real details. So we told them about how often we changed our needles because we wanted nice, really sharp needles, and therefore how often we changed our hands. If people got up, they would wash their hands before they sat down. We wanted it to be as pristine as possible, and every part that we weren't working on but that was on a frame was covered over with tissue paper while we were working. To us, that's just good practice. And we do that all the time. So it was more, shall we say, the gentlemen of the press who got exercised about the frequency of washing our hands and changing our needles.
I used to know some people who worked for Aston Martin, and they would say whenever they had like rich people come to choose their bespoke Aston Martin, sometimes the boys in the warehouse would do things like run a cigarette lighter flame along the side of a panel and then look at it and stroke their chin. And it didn't mean anything. Or they'd like roll a ball bearing down the roof panel and then look at it as though they were just checking the quality to such an extent, just little bits of show business, you know. But the other question I was going to ask is, I guess you guys, you do world-class embroidery. That's what I always say to people. You know, you teach the skills, you teach the finest quality. That's why your tutors have to go through your course. So the work that you would do for that kind of occasion, for the coronation of the king, the work you would do there, A, how do you check the quality of that? But B, presumably that's just the standard. Whether you were doing something for me or for the king, that would be the standard, right?
Absolutely. Yes, we don't make exception of saying, it's going to be lower standard or whatever. No, we celebrate technical hand embroidery. We also celebrate innovation and really exciting things in stitch as well. But what we're known for is technical hand embroidery. So if you want to know how to stitch any of the techniques to the best technical level, then that's what we can offer. And then people can take it off in different directions. So, our leisure courses, they're for fun. They're not about getting too tied up. But if you want to take our certificate and diploma in technical hand embroidery, they are about taking it to a high technical skill. But people enjoy doing that. They come to us for that. And what I really like is when they say to me, I never realized I would get to this standard, that when they start, that's not what they think. And I'm often showing people, for example, at Knitting and Stitching Show, and they see the work that we have on show and they say, oh, I couldn't do that. And I will say, well, she didn't think she could do that before either, or he didn't think, because we have, we have men who take the course as well. And it's always fascinating to say to the student, it's been a journey, and where they started and where they end up, are quite different places. And so the students are trying to push themselves to do the different techniques. And on the certificate, they just do 4 techniques, but really core techniques. So the Jacobean crewel work to learn the variety of stitches, and there's just so many stitches in crewel work. Then either black work or canvas work as a counted thread technique, then silk shading, and then gold work. So you get a really good starting point on all of those techniques, and then you can go on to diploma and you take some of those to the next level. So silk shading and gold work you take to the next level. You do whichever one you didn't do, black work or canvas work at certificate, but you also do additional techniques like applique, stump work, basic introductory white work. So all of these, you're building up your skills and your repertoire. And then advanced diploma, you can do a box, or you can do advanced white work, and perhaps the most fear-inducing one of all, both sides alike.
Oh, no.
Which is, where you have your piece of banner silk and you are literally stitching the same on the front and the back at the same time. And
do you think it would be fair to say that's literally the time when the back needs to look as good as the front and everybody else can relax about the rest of it?
Yes, it is absolutely, because you have to have it on one piece of banner silk, because this is really for warfare. So you needed it so that your left flank and your right flank could see which flag you're following. And so you have to have the embroidery on both sides of one piece of fabric so that it's exactly the same. If you'd had it on 2 pieces of fabric, the flag could become split apart, and then you'd not know which flag you were following. So it was, it had a particular need.
So if someone's worried about what the back of their work should look like, the first question to be asked is it for military use? And if it isn't, relax a little. Is that fair?
Well, again, at the RSN, we teach people that the back should look as good as the front.
Okay.
That's the way that we take it forward. But I think, on the other hand, we can see in other places, other cultures, that's not the same, and it can be quite interesting. So a few years ago, one of our projects for the degree was to work with the Devon Guild of Craftsmen to have an exhibition at their exhibition centre in Bovey Tracy. And we got out some pieces from the collection, and they were allowed to look at these pieces, but not just at the front. They could look at the back, they could look at the construction and everything. And one of our students made this wonderful piece, and it looked a bit like a game of spillikins, but where the individuals, spillikins, whatever you call them, were separated by pieces of embroidery. And what she was saying was that she'd looked at the back of one of the pieces that was a Chinese piece, and it had all these wonderful threads, and they were all so mixed up on the back, and so she had created a piece based on that, but much more three-dimensional.
Okay, I just checked spillikins. I think a lot of people, the game of Kaplunk would remind them of spillikins.
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Pick up sticks, that kind of thing. Yeah. Can we talk for a minute about the Stitch Bank? Because I think that's a project that's like speaks to your role, the RSN's role as like a guardian of Stitch. Is that reasonable?
Absolutely. Yes, the idea for the RSN Stitch Bank actually came from one of my colleagues. She had seen or read about the Kew Seed Bank. So Kew Gardens has this seed bank, and the idea of the seed bank is to protect seeds from all over the world, so that if some disaster happens and a particular plant dies out, that if it's in the seed bank, it could potentially be regerminated and brought back. And so we got the idea that as the RSN is indeed, we think of ourselves as the guardian of hand embroidery, that we wanted to bring together all the stitches in the world. And from a point where we actually don't know how many stitches there are, because I think what we're still finding out is that, for example, chain stitch started in China, but has been literally round the world. And I love the fact that it's chain stitch because it seems quite appropriate.
Yeah.
But, there may be other stitches that have gone round the world. And there may be other stitches that look the same, but are actually worked slightly differently. So what we're trying to do with the RSN Stitch Bank is add to it all of the stitches that we can find. And these are being launched kind of 25 each quarter of the year. So we've just launched our 425th stitches.
Amazing.
So we're now at 425. And so it's great for stitchers because you can get lots more stitches to look at and have a go at. But it's also got a really important historical factor, which is trying to conserve these stitches, because some of the stitches, go back a very long way, some medieval stitches, and they have fallen out of use. And so in some cases, people have done some research on them, and then we can incorporate them. But what we need to do, and I'm afraid we have to raise more money to do this, we want to raise more money to then work with people in different countries to look at their stitches and then be able to add those onto the Stitch Bank, either as this is a new stitch, or this is a variant of this stitch, or this is a completely different stitch. And only by kind of gathering together all of those stitches from different cultures will we be able to do that. Now, that the UN has recognised that stitch is important in tangible cultural history, and in a number of places, Hungary being one. And we would like to kind of follow on from that. But we, as I say, because this is very much part of our charitable activity, we now need to raise more funds to be able to work with people in different countries and take on board their stitches. So how many stitches there will be in the world, we have no idea. Whether it'll be a large number because all these different cultures have lots of extra stitches, or whether it's quite a small core number. We don't know, but we're still working on ones that come into us from other sources, and working towards our 500th to be launched next March.
I think
But
that's
it's
MrXStitch is the 500th one. Can I be in the Stitch Bank? Does that count? Would that be a thing?
yes, people can adopt a stitch, and that's been great fun, and we've got people who adopt it from all over the place.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that's a useful thing to note, isn't it? If people do want to support the project, then they can adopt stitches.
That's right. That's right. They can, and so you just go onto the RSN Stitch Bank. Just that's all you need to put into a search, RSN Stitch Bank, and it'll come up and then look. And the great thing about it is, if you're not an advanced stitcher, you can think, oh, what stitches I want to do a bit of work with wool or crewel work. What stitches might I use? And you can look them up by technique, or you could just say, oh, let me find a stitch I don't know. And they've all got a little icon of kind of what it looks like when it's finished. So it depends. If you want to have something that's going to fill up a lot of space as a stitch, you can go for one that looks like that. If you want one that's going to look very tiny, then you can, find seed stitch or French knots, and if like me, you can never remember which way round you start with your French knot. It's great to be, there's a little video that you can watch for each stitch. So you can look and see, oh, that's that way, and just remember how to do it. So
have there been any stitches that are sort of like, like every now and again, as we said with Mr. Synthetic Dye, sometimes people make a discovery and it opens up a whole other world. Have you come across any stitches that have suddenly opened up a new family of stitches, or meant you've had to correct your taxonomy of stitches? Has anything like that happened?
We've certainly found ones that have, mean that the alternative names gets longer and longer and longer. So,
right.
That is actually the same stitch as this. And we have a small team working on it, and the challenge now is that as they get a new stitch, and I put that in inverted commas initially, as they get a new stitch, they actually have to check, is this a new stitch, or is this the same as another stitch we've already got but with a different name? And so actually that cross-checking takes longer now. They can't just assume every new stitch they are given is a new stitch, because it might be like one that's already there, and then they see how exactly is it like it or not, and then they add it in as a completely different stitch or as a variant, and so on.
She's fantastic. I think the fact that you're heading quite comfortably towards 500 different stitches kind of will blow a lot of people's minds, because I know people don't understand embroidery as it is, but even those of us who've got a bit of a handle on it will still go, 500 stitches? I would have gone, maybe there's 150 different or something, but 500 is incredible.
Yes, it is. And again, the variety of them and the different techniques that they can be used on, it is terrific. And we are delighted when more and more people get to know about it and get to share it through their groups and societies. We've had groups where they've done a sort of competition or an activity based around picking a couple of stitches, and then as new stitches, see what you can do with this kind of competition, and things that we love hearing about, stories like that, about how people are using it.
Yeah, it's a great resource indeed. I'm going to, if I may, pivot to a different question now. This one could go large, but I'll try and keep it down. You said at the start of when we were talking about the start of the RSN that one of the things that had happened, and it is interesting because it's almost like embroidery had become quite homogenized, and there was something about it reminding people that it was a valid art form. Now, some people might say 150 years on, still kind of having that conversation. I would love to get your perspective on the needleworkers' art debate, please.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, that whole issue of art versus craft. And so, again, from the beginning, we have always thought of embroidery as an art form. And to us, it should be seen on gallery walls alongside fine art. It has the value of that. And my big thing would be for people to look at something that's embroidered and for their first question not to be, how long did that take? Because I think nobody went to Tracy Emin and asked her how long her unmade bed took. It's not a relevant question. And why people think the length of time for making a piece of embroidery is a relevant question. That's the one that really gets to me, because we very much see it as an art form, and that people are, expressing themselves, and most of what they are making is, again, for an artistic purpose. It's not just about the craft practice, although the craft practice is what they are looking to make better and to improve. But they're doing it to have something at the end of it which they appreciate, that they like looking at, that and people will go, wow, that looks terrific, so it's from the art side of it. But on the other hand, we quite accept that craft practice is very good for mental health. And that's perhaps not so much about the end product, but actually about the doing of the craft activity, which we have known for a very long time, certainly since the First World War, that it can be very therapeutic to stitch. And my predecessor as head of the RSN back in the Second World War, Lady Smith Dorian, she sent out a press release to all the Allied countries saying, don't knit, stitch. So the thing with knitting is that when you get very good, you can do it on almost an automatic pilot. So you're not, you're having a conversation while you're knitting. You're thinking, you're still worrying and thinking while you're knitting. But when you're stitching, you have to be focused on what you are stitching and how you're using the colours and how you're creating the piece and so on. And as such, it can allow other parts of the mind and the body to relax and to heal. And so that has the kind of bigger picture scope to it, and why she said focus on embroidery. And many people that I have spoken to have confirmed that when they are stitching, they're really focused on the stitching, and so other parts of the body are kind of not involved, and they can then be calmed and healed. And I think that's really important. So that's, if you like, the craft aspect of it. And because with stitch, it is a repetitive action. It can become almost meditative to do that. So it has its value from a craft perspective. But finished product, I think we would always like to think of it as art.
Yeah, those the ladies doing the Queen Victoria cowl being the most calm, stressed out people you've ever met in your life. I mean, I've said it frequently, because when you meditate, your mind drifts, and you're always supposed to bring yourself back to center and focus on your breathing. And every time you're plunging the needle into the fabric, you have to be in the moment doing that thing. And if you're even just doing cross stitch, you'll be doing that a couple of times a second. So you're forever recentering. And I think that really unlocks that meditative power completely. The perspective that you've got on the history of textiles, as it were, are you able to see any particular points in time when the needlework's just a craft for little old ladies story really took a hold?
I think I can look at it, because one of the things that we're working on at the moment is a new course on the history of embroidery. And I think in the 20th century, perhaps it began around the 1960s.
Right.
And there was a sort of review looking backwards. The 1950s, the Second World War, there'd been a lot of needlework being done at that time, particularly on household textiles, on embellishment of garments and so on. But you get to the 1960s and people wanted the brave new world. They wanted things that were different. They didn't want to do what their mum had done. They didn't want to have the same kind of materials. There were new materials coming out in the 60s, new colours. You have people like Mary Quant as key designers. And it was all about having, if I can put it these ways, shop bought, not homemade. And
Right.
that kind of began to change the way that we thought about crafts and textiles. And I think that then led on for the craft side to become seen as a bit old-fashioned. It's what your mum did, what your gran did, making things at home. And the modern youth wanted the new, exciting things you could go and buy. And so I think that was when the transition kind of began. But then I think we've now, now 60 years later, it's ready to go in the other way as people are going and saying, actually, I think I want to do a bit of craft, again for mindfulness, again for something that I've made for myself, and something that is not just using my two thumbs on a screen. And we've recently just been we were approached by the BBC to do an article on needlepoint on that, because again, they're seeing this younger generation now becoming not quite screen phobic, but having had enough of the screen for a while and wanting something that is much more physical, that is textural, that is a bit more real. And so I think there is an opportunity for a resurgence in embroidery through all of that reawakening.
Yeah, that's a really exciting prospect, isn't it? Because as we say, the mindfulness of it is such a strong element, and yet even with cross stitch and some of the other stitches, they're so simple to learn. Like the barrier to entry is so low, it's economically low, it doesn't weigh very much, it's a really easy thing to get into. And I think, I as well think it's interesting that we've had this. It's almost like, to me, it feels like the marketing that happened, as you say, post-war, the American dream, all of that kind of stuff sold us loads of ideas, and we kind of accepted them because they were new ideas until about like the late 80s, when we started to think that maybe these ideas weren't the best for the planet. And now you kind of end up where we are now, aren't we, where people are just, and I don't know, I do live in hope that I think a lot of these ideas are just will fall away. They sort of, like the thing about, even like the novelty of me, I've been doing this since 2008 now, so I've been around a while, nearly been doing the role as long as you've been doing your role, but the novelty of me going, I'm a man involved in the world of needlework, still persists. But I think now you don't have to shine as bright a light on it for people to tune into the goodness of it.
Absolutely. And back in 2018, we launched a project for schools, and the initial incarnation of it was Stitch a Selfie. So again, it was because we were very aware that teaching of handcrafts, etc., has disappeared out of school. And we've been really thrilled about the way that has been taken up, because we send them a kit. They can access videos online to see how to stitch, and the way it's been used in schools has been really innovative. So some people did it with their textile class, some did it with art and design, some have used it for an after schools class, some have used it with those who are academically challenged, and some have used it with the academically brightest. So there's a whole range of the ways in which it's been used. And as I say, it started as Stitch a Selfie, as a bit of fun, and it was for the whole class. And because Stitch has not been incorporated for a long time, there's no gender issue here. It's for everybody. And we, in the little booklet that they received, there were examples of pieces done by some of our past male students as well as female students. So people could clearly see it's for everybody. And so we've had some good examples. Then we went on to Stitch a Mantra, and so that you could, something that meant something to you, words of encouragement. So if you're having a bad day, you can get it out and have a little look and remind yourself. And then we're just about to do a next iteration, which will be looking at around nature. But we, at the not machine stitching, at the new designers that we're at the moment, as I'm recording this, we've actually got a slate frame set up on trestles that people can come and have a go at. And I was absolutely thrilled yesterday to see 5 pupils from a school, just all sitting there, boys and girls, just sitting there having a go, and they were telling us about what they've been doing in textile class, and I'm going, yay! That's fantastic.
So
That they
good.
were all doing it and all taking part in it. That's what we want
Yeah.
to see.
And I mean, as you said when we started talking, you've got, is it 18 degree students at New Designers this year?
26.
26.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? That's such a good. I love the degree course. I remember seeing, like, and tying in with what we said before, how you teach the foundations of the craft for the first bit, so that people have the techniques. But then it's always great, you see the first year students and they're learning the basics, and then you see the third year students and they've gone in all these different directions because they've really like flourished the artistic side of it. It must be so rewarding.
It is, and it is just that huge variety. It's the first thing people say when they come and see the work, how different they are. So, one person has embellished a chair this time with the most amazing 3-dimensional sculptural pieces of embroidery, but all in a cream colour, so it looks incredibly stylish. Possibly wouldn't want to sit on it, but you get the idea. And then she said, well, yes, but I've done this chair for the show. You might have this as cushions, or you might have it on other accoutrements that you could use. And then somebody else has done an embroidered musical instrument alongside album covers and guitar straps that she's embroidered. And then somebody else has done more beadwork to make some amazing pieces for to wear with dresses. So it's just, each person has done something different, and they've got their own story behind it. One has done something based around the era of the plague. I mean, how different is that? Complete
That's the most
with
beautiful plague
3
you've ever seen.
textile wraps at the bottom.
Oh, amazing. I mean, you must, in this, I guess there's a natural period of reflection that's now happening as you come towards the end of your tenure. You've got to be proud. You've got to be proud of where we're at.
I'm very proud of what we've achieved. And the other day I was looking to put into the archive past strategic plans and actually going, how many things can we actually tick off and that we have brought in, and how we have moved things forward. The whole kind of international aspect, which again began in 2018 when we had the summer school in America. We'd been to America before, but in the small scale. And this was a huge, big thing in 2018. And we're just about to go back to America this year. But then the one thing that was not ever on a strategic plan was completely pivoting the organisation in 2020 to be able to teach online, because we'd always thought
so well.
It wasn't going to be possible. And I think it was the right time with the technology. I think prior, if it had been any earlier, we wouldn't have had the technology in place to be able to do it. But with the technology, and then things like WhatsApp and being able to photograph your work and send that through, and people can see how you're doing, I think that made all the difference to it working. But I was very proud that we had our first online short class in May 2020. That was a remarkably short time after lockdown to actually be able to put something on. And we haven't looked back since, and we're still teaching online and up to 3 different time zones.
It's so good. It's so good. There's nary a cold internet seat happening somewhere, I think.
Yes.
Trying to plug that old analogy back in. Right. Let's go for the really hard task now, because we've talked about the history of textile colour. We've talked about the art versus craft debate. Right. Do you have a favourite band / album?
Oh, it's very hard, I have to say. But I think the one that I came back to, simply because I know I revisit it quite often, it's Carole King's Tapestry.
Oh, and that's very, very apt. Very apt. Love that. It's a good one. I've got that on vinyl. That's out on the top shelf at the moment in our place. Do you have a favourite song out of that, or is it you can listen to the whole piece?
I listen to the whole album, and frankly, even going onto Spotify, I'll just say, play me that album, and go through it. Yeah.
I mean, do you listen to much music when you're working? I know that a lot of your work isn't necessarily as creative in the way that I'll have conversations with other people who are sitting there, machine embroidering, whatever. But how much is music a part of your world?
Less than it might be, I think, because my world has been so work focused that I tend to put it on after work, as it were. Although I do spend quite a few Sundays writing presentations, lectures, and things like that, and then I will remind myself to put the music on in the background, and just have that there. Yeah.
Do you listen to podcasts at all?
Only a little bit. Again, it's finding the time to fit them all in, and done one or two. But...
Okay. What about books then? Do you have a favourite book? Do you have a favourite author? What was the last good book you read?
Oh, see, that's really hard. I like to read. I've always liked to read since I was a small child, and as we're hopefully going to be moving house soon, I've now got the huge task of taking each book. Will I read that one again? Do I keep it? Do I send it to the charity shop? That's really hard. Favourite book overall, possibly North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Yeah, there are ones that
Do you read much fiction, or do you tend to go kind of non-fiction? Are you often reading like research material?
I like fiction because I have to read for research. You have to read the non-fiction all the time. Although some of that can be quite interesting and almost fictional when you're reading some of what they think the recipes are or things. That can be really interesting. But that's not for my area of research. That's not so much books. That's original materials, looking at dye colour charts and comparisons from different dye houses, things like that. So it's not reading in quite the same way. But no, I love fiction, and I'm constantly have something on the go. Currently on the go, I have Wolf Hall. I know everybody else has read it, but I'm only just getting round to it. But I'm enjoying that so far.
Yeah. I'm sure Hilary Mantel would love to have a chat with you about needlework. I believe she's quite the fan. Have you got a favourite film?
I'm stuck between two, really.
Okay.
One is called Inside I'm Dancing. If I had an alternative career, I would really like to be the person who commissions the films that are put out on the television, because I think there is such a limited range that are shown. Do we really need to see The Devil Wears Prada yet again? There are many other more exciting films that we could be watching that are never timetabled for television. And Inside I'm Dancing is about two disabled guys who get to kind of share a house, and they kind of egg each other on, and they're trying to kind of go and have an adventure. And they get to go out, and they're both in wheelchairs, and they get to go out, and they go, and inevitably one of them dies at the end, because they are in a really quite bad way. But it's just that kind of challenge to life and wanting to live their fullest life they possibly can, which I think is fantastic about that. I've never seen it on the television. I think I used to be a great DVD person, and I would go around some of the places and see what I'd not seen before. And then the other one is The Piano, which is the one of the set in New Zealand, where the woman goes out to be married off, because they'd advertised in New Zealand and got all these people investigating and setting it up, as it were, establishing New Zealand, and then they advertised for women to go out. And it's quite, in some ways, it's quite harrowing. In some cases, it's quite violent treatment. But it's the one film that I watched all the way through and just thought it was so shocking, but so amazing. I literally put it back on and watched it all the way through again, which is the first time I've ever done that to a film.
Yeah.
But it also has an RSN link, because our very first student, Martha Lee, who came to us when her father had died. So she came with two of her sisters. Her father had died and leaving a widow and four daughters wholly unprovided for. Well, Martha stayed with us for nearly 20 years and then went out to New Zealand to be married. So it's kind of got that little connection to it as well. I hope what happened to her was better than what happened to the woman in the story.
Yeah. Now, normally what happens at this point is I ask for an interesting fact that not a lot of people know about you, and I am willing to do that, but I did want to ask you about an interesting fact that I know about you to see whether it's still relevant. Is I read an interview with you from 2016, upon which you said you enjoy growing vegetables in your 6 organic raised beds, and I wondered whether that was still true.
Alas, it is not true, because during lockdown and after, when everybody else seemed to get out into their garden, that was when I was working 24/7 and only looked at my garden because I was pivoting the organisation. I was curating the exhibition, which had to be ready for 2022, and trying to get everything on board, which was a nightmare because half the places we wanted to borrow from were closed, and so that was quite challenging. And I was researching our history so I could write the book on the 150 years of the RSN. So I'm afraid my garden got completely abandoned. And then since then it's kind of deteriorated because then I was unwell in 2022, and so but yesterday the 6 beds are just about still there at the back.
Okay.
And my husband was clearing some of the weed that's now come across the top of it, but we did find 3 asparagus spears had made it. So I had those last night. I have been taking asparagus spears off, but we thought we'd had the last of them. But yeah, so there is still a little bit of vegetable out there.
Because you used to be the chief exec of Garden Organic, which I thought was fantastic as well. So, I mean, that must have been the one thing I observed as well about your career path is prior to that, you also worked for Girl Guiding and apparently changed their name or something.
Yes.
Can you just tell that story? That's interesting.
Yes, that was when I went to the Guide Association, which is responsible for Guides and Brownies, or Girl Scouts if you're listening from America. And I was their first head of marketing. And we kept getting people contacting us. And I remember one particular call from this guy. And we'd been talking, and he wanted some people at an event. And, you know, guides are quite young, sort of 10 to 14, so we don't like them to be out too late in the evenings. And what exactly did he want them to do? And he said, I have to stop you there. I'm a bit confused. Do the girls have the dogs? And I suddenly realised that he was actually talking about guide dogs for the blind, not girl guides. And so we thought about this, and we thought we need to change the name. And so we worked with an agency. And what was quite fun, though, was that the agency said to us, right, now to get some ideas about what you think about and the organisation, here's a whole room full of magazines. Pick out some pictures and then tell us about what aspect that you've picked, what it illustrates about guides. We were straight in there. We knew exactly what we were doing. We got all our things. And I, for example, I remember I had a staircase that went up and round the corner, but you couldn't see where it went to. And I said, to me, this represents guides in the sense that it gives you lots of opportunities. So you're going up the stairs, but you never know where you're going to take it in the end. And that's for you to discover further. And yeah, fantastic. And they said to us, my word, you're fantastic on this. We had BMW in here last week. They couldn't do this at all. And we just said, but this is very guiding. This is exactly the kind of thing that we would do. To us, this came naturally. So in the end, we changed it initially to Girl Guiding UK. So I became the chief guys envoy to go out to all the different parts of UK, say this is what we're going to change it to, but you will be Girl Guiding Scotland, Girl Guiding Cymru, Girl Guiding Isle of Man. So that was great fun to go out and to do that. And then we got it passed. I think they have now dropped the UK because it just got too difficult, but we're keeping the Girl Guiding, but then each individual area is still Girl Guiding Pulteney-Fylde or Girl Guiding Manchester or whatever. And so that was good fun to do. And the point of the new name is that that's what the organisation is, but it's also reflects and respects the leaders, because what they are doing is girl guiding. So it kind of has a combined name. And then we had a new strapline, which was Surprise Yourself, because we said that people who are in guides surprise themselves all the time about the opportunities they get and the things that they can do. The leaders likewise surprise themselves at the opportunities they get, but also seeing what the girls achieve. And then people who view us from outside, once they actually get to see what we really do, are surprised by that. So it was a good kind of, again, multiple layered strapline we had.
Amazing. It's like the career, I've only really gone back that far, but you've definitely been able to work for some very noble organisations. It must have been, again, even Garden Organic. Presumably, were you based at Ryton?
Yes.
Was that where you... Yeah, I've been there. Love that place. So good. So good. I went there once for Potato Day.
Oh yes,
and
Potato
where you'd
Day.
have like the marquees, and I remember closing my eyes and listening to the sound of, I don't know, about 400 paper bags rustling as people put potatoes in them, going, I'm not going to hear this noise ever again. It was amazing.
It is amazing, Potato Day. It's a fantastic thing, and yes, the whole varieties of seed potatoes. So you can have earlies, late earlies, main crop, late crop, and the different types, whether you want them waxy or you want them flowery, and depending on what you're going to do with them eventually. Yeah, it's a great day.
Yeah. You get your pink fir apple, which is the same pink fir apple that was growing in like the 1400s or whatever as well, isn't it? It was amazing.
Yes.
Shall we find out, is there an interesting fact that not a lot of people know about Dr. Susan K. Williams? Well,
in fact, the one that I came up with is linked to Garden Organic, and again, something that not many people will have done. I actually held a cucumber tasting session at Garden Organic one year, and you think, cucumber, don't they all taste the same? No, I can tell you they do not. Because we had a special sort of summer fair, and so we were growing a whole variety of different heritage cucumbers. And I got them to give me kind of one of each, and we sliced into them, and it was really interesting just how varied cucumber can be, which you would never know from supermarket shelves because they all taste the same. But if you're into cucumber, you can join the Heritage Seed Library of Garden Organic and find different varieties, and they do actually taste different.
If there was what, because for instance, I grow a few tomatoes, and there's a variety called Sun Gold that they're like these little orangey tomatoes, but the flavour knocks your socks off. It's so good. Is there the cucumber? Do you have a favourite variety of cucumber?
I'm afraid I don't remember the names, I have to say. Alas. No, you'll just have to go and try a few.
I would have got serious smug points in my family if I'd have been able to go, well, I've been recommended the Silver Lancet. That's apparently that's amazing. I just wanted to say, from my own personal perspective, what a pleasure it has been to work with you over the years. I can remember driving back from Hampton Court one time where I had been doing an exhibition, and I feel like it may have been for like the Textile Biennial, or it was something or other, and you'd lent me some cross stitches from the 1800s, and they were in the back of my car, and I was just going, I can't believe that they've trusted me with all this kind of responsibility and stuff. But it's been like, I'm a fan of yours and will forever be a fan of yours, and I love the RSN. I love the things that you've been able to achieve. I love the fact that you've been willing to come and chat with me for the best part of 2 hours as well. And I just wanted to say thank you, really, because you're an important part of this. There's no denying it.
Thank you. It's been a great pleasure, and it was certainly great fun to talk about the colour aspect at the beginning, which, as you say, is my research interest, and certainly inspired by what's behind you and your colour layout of threads. There is fantastic. Yeah, I love
I
would
say. Where have I put it? I was going to say where. Oh, here we go. Yeah. And if anybody wants to, The Story of Colour in Textiles by Susan K. Williams is still available from all good book retailers. And what's the other book called? Because you've had a book more recently than that, haven't you?
The latest book is An Unbroken Thread, 150 Years of the RSN. And it now actually is in 2 editions, because the original edition came out in 2022 before we knew anything about the coronation. And so I've now written a second edition with an extra chapter that features the 9 pieces that we worked for the coronation, a part of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really lovely kind of point to have had, isn't it? Because I suppose there was a risk that you could have been there the whole time and never really done the coronation thing, as opposed to some of your predecessors. So that must have been a nice tick on the checkbox as well.
That was above and beyond, to do one royal piece for the Princess of Wales. That was absolutely terrific. To actually be there as part of the coronation work, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, amazing. Dr. Susan K. Williams, thank you for having the Needle Exchange with me.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for joining me on another Needle Exchange. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear from you, so feel free to email hello@needle.exchange, that's NEEDL.exchange, with any thoughts, comments or feedback. And if you want to keep up with all the news, sign up to the Needle Exchange mailing list at bit.ly/NeedleExchange. See you next time.